Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. There are incredible everyday women in the middle of life doing amazing things. It's not just the rich and famous or the young celebrities and influencers that we should listen to or follow. In fact, they're usually so far removed from reality that it's hard to relate our lives with theirs. I really want this show to be a place where everyday women in this stage of life can also feel seen and heard. And today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Michelle Parsonage. And like most of us, Michelle doesn't think that her past or her present is particularly interesting or important. That's not the case at all. You might hear parts of Michelle's background story and find that they might be similar to yours. And it's comforting when we hear our own story in someone else's. You don't feel so alone or isolated. Now, like for many of us, the middle of life made Michelle want to look within to discover who she was now and what she really wanted to do for her next half of life. For Michelle, receiving some guidance led her to discover what she feels is her calling in life. And I just love that for her, and I want to celebrate that. You know, in the busyness of our life, most of us don't stop to ask ourselves some of these big questions. But as I've found, and as Michelle has found, and the women that I mentor find, it can open up so many incredible opportunities and new life experiences that would have otherwise just passed you by. Now, life is short. I encourage you to do something today to show that you're more committed to your dreams than you are to your doubts, to your excuses, or any of your limiting beliefs. And I want to remind you, now you're not too old and it's never too late. If you're interested in exploring your future, but you just don't know where to start, then I'd love you to take this first brave step. Go to the show notes, click on the link to book a free 20-minute connection call with me. Now, I've been down this road before myself, and I help other women where you are right now. And I'm offering you some free support to help you reimagine your next chapter. It just takes that first step. Now, without any further ado, it's time for me to introduce you to the lovely Michelle Parsonage and her special story. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast, Michelle. Now, you are a fellow podcaster and your show is called Your Second Act. And that's also for women who are in the middle of life, which is great that we can talk about a subject that's very close to our heart. And we'll talk more about your podcast and how you got there later in life. But right now, we're going to see how your life experiences led you to where you are today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jo. I'm really excited to be on. I've been following your content for a while now. So I think the platform of Instagram is amazing. I'm meeting so many people that way. And like you said, like-minded. And I'm really excited to, be on your show and delve in.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for coming on and just chatting about it, because again, we discussed before we actually hit record in a session we did, actually last week, wasn't it? We were talking about what we were going to do for this particular interview. And it's that whole women just need to hear that we have similar experiences, that we are far more alike than we are different. And I think just hearing that other women are going through some things that you might be going through and you feel like you're the only one, that's not the case. And that's why platforms and so podcasts like you've got and what I've got are really helpful for that.
Yeah, everything is about being relatable. That's what I connect with content that way, because not everything is shiny and new, and how it appears on the outside is definitely it's not what happens, on the inside. So that's what really pushed me to want to do this podcast, and I'm sure you're very similar.
Oh, very much so. I think you as we said before, your life's not always shiny and bright, and where you come from and all of our stories might be different, but there's going to be commonalities in there. And
Yes.
I love listening to where other women have gone before me and where they're heading to. And I just find it really fascinating.
Me too. I love a good story and I love to chat. So I'm in the right place.
You are, my friend, you are. Now, so we'll get in and I'll start doing the questioning and find out more about you, Michelle. So you grew
Okay.
up in Wollongong. What was it?
Yes,
Mouthful to say then. And you were
it
raised
is.
by Italian and Spanish parents. So how was it for you growing up with your background of having parents from a different cultural group? And how do you think that might have shaped your childhood?
Look, they obviously, I mean, they speak English, but English was not the first language that I actually didn't know how to speak English when I started school. So that I think set me back a little bit when I started school. And I did go to school with a lot of children who had migrant parents. But there was a little bit of a stigma, especially back in the 70s. You're a wog, you're different, your sandwiches smell different, all of that.
Yeah.
And I guess I grew a little bit of a complex because of it. But then it just became, well, that's who I am. But I was a very shy little girl. And I think feeling different to other people made it even worse. So for me, I had quite an idyllic upbringing, great parents, loving environment, but a very sheltered upbringing. So for me, if I reflect back, it was nice, but I do feel, I guess I feel a little bit sorry for little Michelle. I think she was lost for a long time.
Yeah. And that's so common, isn't it, with different cultural groups or being in any sort of marginal group in society, whether you are from a different cultural group, whether you, some cases female, being an older female, there's that whole other, isn't there? Feeling other. And all you want to do is
Yes,
be accepted and belong, particularly when you are a child and growing up. So
yes.
the whole, when you said you were sheltered, was that because your parents were more conservative than other families that were around at that point in time? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think I had a very overprotective mother. She was raised without a mother. She lost her mum at 10. So when she had my sister and myself, it was like we were her world. So, yes, she was quite strict in that sense. So, whereas I saw other friends were allowed to do certain things, I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I just kind of got used to that way of life and I didn't question it. Where it was interesting, my sister, on the other hand, she pushed all the boundaries. Being younger, maybe that was the difference. But she always said, "You did not pave the way for me." No, I did not.
She doesn't thank you in the least then for making it easier.
That's right. Absolutely. So yeah, very sheltered in the sense that I guess they feared that things would happen. So better not to push yourself out there in case that does happen. And I felt a lot of fear as well growing up. I think it was in one episode I was making a comparison of a friend of mine who I went to school with. She basically was losing her sight. She couldn't see that well. And when we left school, she traveled on her own all over the world. And
Holy.
there I was, too scared to get on a train from Sydney to Wollongong on my own. So it's just crazy how I just allowed my fear to hold me back for a long, long time.
And so that was the same when you went through high school, was it? You felt the same as what you did when you were a younger child?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I guess things definitely changed for me. Just to go back a bit, I ended up marrying my childhood sweetheart at the age of 23. And then by the age of 25, that marriage was over. And then that's what propelled me into having to push myself forward. And I moved to Sydney. And that's where I got my wings and I started to fly. And I have never looked back.
That's huge, isn't it? A 2-year marriage in your early 20s, and then to find out that,
Oh,
yeah. So for you, do you think if you hadn't got married at a younger age, I suppose you never know because this is all hypothetical, but would you have had the courage to go to Sydney, do you think?
post-marriage? Like you went there
Yeah.
after a marriage and after you maybe wanted a brand new change and to show a different side of yourself?
Yeah. Look, if you asked me what my ambition was back in those days, it was to be married and have children.
Mm.
I grew up thinking that's what I wanted. Career wasn't a big thing for me. But if I look back now, if I hadn't have been in that relationship from the age of 17, yeah, I do think that I would have made different choices because I look at some of my friends who did. So I think that would encourage me to do that, to push forward and push through my fear. But I guess it all comes down to your experience in life. It makes you who you are. And obviously that was my journey. I had to go through that to come out the other side and realize that, oh my gosh, there is way more to life than being married and having children at such a young age. It works for some people. Obviously, for me, it just didn't.
That must have taken some courage too to decide to leave that marriage. Was that
Yeah.
a decision with both, you and your husband at that point in time, or was that something that you just chose?
Oh, no. Well, basically what happened, there was infidelity on his side. And, I look back now, I think we were so young.
Yeah.
We were so young. And at the time, it was completely devastating. But now I think, we didn't have the chance to experience other people. And I say that to my girls. You shouldn't marry the first person you date. I just think you need to experience different people to essentially know what it is that you want in somebody. So I think looking back, I think the spark or the light bulb went off for him earlier than it did for me. And unfortunately, he did choose to go about it the wrong way, but he did me a favor and I'm sure he did himself a favor. So yeah, in a sense, neither of us have looked back. I'm sure I don't have anything to do with him, but I know that he's moved on and, he's living a good life, I suspect.
Yes. Well, without having that marriage, you wouldn't be where you are today. So I'm always thankful for some of the past experiences, because without that and the teachings and the learnings we get from it, we wouldn't be the people that we are.
No, absolutely not. And I'm so thankful that happened.
So now then, Sydney beckoned, you headed to Sydney and you found yourself working in the property industry. So how did that come about to get into that industry?
So a friend of mine who was in recruitment, I was working for a civil engineer in Wollongong and I was a drafting assistant. So not really anything that I necessarily wanted to do. I'm a very creative person, so I did enjoy the drawing side of things. But anyway, she said, look, there's a role going for a property management company in the city. You should apply for it. And at that point, I was just desperate. Yes, I'll just do whatever. So I moved up to Sydney and I started in this business and worked there for a couple of years and then decided I wanted to get into marketing. So I went back to school and studied marketing. And then there was a role that opened up in another company. And that's where I ended up meeting my husband today. So that was 25 years ago. And it was a very different experience to my first relationship. He's actually 3 years younger than me, so that's quite nice.
Oh, I bet that got the whispers going in the office, hey?
Oh, yeah. Well, soon after we started dating, I decided to move on. So I thought we can't work in the same department. It's just too hard. Yeah. So then we got married, and 5 days later, we took off to London and started our married life over there with our careers, and we had an absolute blast. It was the best thing. But I remember thinking at the time, it was such a big step to move to Sydney and then to move to the other side of the world. And I'm so close to my family. I thought, I just can't do it. But there was something within him that gave me the confidence that you can do this. And he's always been my cheerleader in that sense. He's always pushed me and given me the encouragement that I needed. And I'm so glad that we did it, because we ended up going over there twice for 2 stints. Mm-hmm. So in total, we're there for 5 years and just had the best time. It's one of the best things that you can do, I think, is to move away. It changes your perspective on the world, on life, and you as a person grow as well.
And you were working in property as well during that time?
No, then I ended up working at a law firm in their marketing department. Yeah. And soon after, I fell pregnant with my first child. So she was born over there, and that was, such a special time.
Yeah. And were both girls born over there at all?
No, then I had my second one back in Sydney, and then we moved over again when they were both really young.
Right. So do they both
yeah.
have dual passports? Because I tell you what, if the older, I could just imagine the sibling rivalry if one had a dual passport and citizenship, the other didn't.
Yeah, no, well, unfortunately, you have to reside for 5 years in the country in
Oh,
order to be eligible for it. And because we came back when she was about 1,
gotcha. Yeah.
but they do have an EU passport, which is even
Oh, that's
better. So they
gold.
can work
Yes.
anywhere in Europe.
Yeah.
And that's through my dad. So
Oh,
yeah, lucky girls.
yes, very much so. And so what year did you come back to Australia, and what made you come back to
Well, 2008, the GFC hit,
Mhm.
and my husband, his role in the UK basically was closed down, and he was moved back to Sydney. And yeah, we decided, oh, okay. We were actually planning to move to London permanently, because we just loved the lifestyle, and you make friends, you make a life for yourself. So then we moved back, and we've been here ever since. And in hindsight, I'm glad that we raised the girls here, because I think, as beautiful and exciting as London is, it's not the same as raising children in Australia.
Yeah. And that was back to Sydney?
Back to Sydney, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
So we've been here ever since.
And in our discussion last week, you were telling me that you began working in interior design. So how did you go from working in real estate, then into marketing, because you did the study in marketing? How did you get into interior design?
My mother-in-law is an interior designer. And when I got back from the UK, she said, why don't you come and work part-time for me? And I thought, oh, why not? Anyway, I just loved it. Something sparked within me. And I think, again, it goes back to my creativity. I like to be around creative things. And then that sparked me to, again, go back to school and study interiors, which I loved. And I began working for myself as an interior stylist, especially for properties that were going on the market. And I really enjoyed it initially, but then I realized that dealing with clients sparked anxiety within me, because in my previous jobs, I wasn't really dealing with the client. It was all sort of back office stuff. And I felt that I was second guessing my skill. And each time I would go and do a job, I was so concerned about what they would think of what I was doing, of me. And in the end, it just became too much, that I lost the spark and I lost my desire to do it. So I closed that business down, and then began working as a investment property management business. So I've been working there ever since. I do all the marketing for the business. But that's what led me, I guess, a few years ago when I turned 50, I found myself at crossroads. I just started thinking, yes, I enjoy working in the family business, but it's not sparking joy within me. It's more out of necessity. And also finding myself, which I know a lot of women do feel this way, I was something to everybody. I was helping everyone on their path and their journey and making sure that they were okay. But then I started thinking, well, who's helping me? No, I'm not even thinking about myself. I'm getting lost in their lives. And what's my purpose? So that sent me on a bit of a spiral of really working on myself and also getting help. And I found an amazing kinesiologist who definitely opened my eyes to, who am I essentially? What is it that I want to do? What is my sole purpose in life? And initially I thought, oh, this is a little bit woo-woo, but I pushed all of that aside and I delved in deep, and I went to some places that, look, basically they weren't comfortable, because I really had to dig up a lot of why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And yeah, I always had this thought in the back of my mind that I would like to do a podcast, but I thought to myself, well, you can't do that. How are you going to do that? You've never done that before. I thought, yeah, I realize that, but this is me, having a tennis match, in my own head. Why can't you do that? And obviously the kinesiologist kept on pushing me. Why? And it's like, oh, I don't know. What will people think? Will I look stupid? I've never done this before. So slowly I worked through that. And then I realized if I don't have a go, then I'll never know, as cliche as that sounds, but it's true. I won't know. If I fail, at least I've tried. And at the end of the day, most people were so encouraging of me doing this that I thought, well, why am I so concerned about what they're going to think of me? I'm the one who's actually stepping out there and putting myself out there on the line. So I feel that essentially where I've landed, it's where I was always meant to land, because it has filled such a desire within me. It's given me a purpose that I don't think I've ever felt before, because I really feel now at the age of 53, I'm standing on my own 2 feet doing what the hell I want to do. And it's got nothing to do with anybody else in my family. And that's what I like. It's just me, my independence. And that's what I have really enjoyed on this journey so far.
Well, the ripple effect of that as well is huge, isn't it? When you think about when you're standing, in inverted commas, I'll say authentic self, when you unpeel all of those layers, it's like peeling the layers of an onion, isn't it? You're just trying to get to the core of some of the thought processes from the past, those origin stories that we've all got. Everybody's got origin stories, and a whole lot of limiting beliefs that will stop us from taking a risk, and then worrying about what other people think. And that's often based on an old origin story as well, when in reality, people are concerned about their own little bit of real estate around them and worrying about what the other people think.
100%.
So we spend so much time about that. And you mentioned a couple of times having that sense of purpose. And I think for many women, once we get to, into our 40s and we've into our 50s, we really start to unpack that and look at it through different eyes. What really is our purpose? And as you said, so much of our purpose was tied up in making sure everybody else was okay and looking after their wants and their needs. That slowly what we wanted just seemed to be forgotten. And what you might have wanted when you're in your 20s, when you had an idea, it's so different to where you are now in this stage of life. So it's asking those big questions, and it's uncomfortable. Holy, I hope women do that with the work that I do. Is just, you never get to ask yourself those questions until you actually stop and decide to.
Yeah. And it's amazing what you learn about yourself. And I keep on learning. It's really bizarre. Conditioning is so bad that I wish that you could just be able to peel it all away. But I've realized it takes time, because it's 50 odd years of conditioning. So how can you all of a sudden turn around and say, no, I'm fine now, it's all good? No, it's not, because that little Michelle still comes in and says, no, you can't do that, or, that's really embarrassing, and challenges me constantly. But I've just got to keep on saying, you're okay, I'm the adult now, I can do this. So if there's any advice I'm going to give women in our age group, is if you have the opportunity to work with somebody who can help you unravel all this conditioning, remove it, and you find out even just a small part of who you are, it's an amazing feeling. I'm not sure that people can do it on their own. Possibly. No. I couldn't.
Takes a lot longer too if you do, Michelle, because I started doing that by myself, but it wasn't until I did some of that harder work that you realise that it will speed the process up so much faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can spin the wheels going around in circles and thinking you know what you're doing, and that's not the case. If you've got someone to guide you and ask you questions, because it's hard
Yes.
to shine the light on areas of what you don't want to see yourself.
No.
You know, you're going to turn that light away from that, but somebody else can see and pull. And I think we often, and you spoke about that little Michelle and the voices that sometimes that she will say and whisper in your ear that are unkind and will hold you back.
Yeah.
If you've got someone else who can challenge that and see more of your potential than you can see for yourself, that's really empowering.
I think so. That's why I'm all for coaching. I think everyone should have one. You know, gone are the days of the therapist, which you do you, whatever works for you. But I think the value of being coached is amazing, because I think straight away the coach kind of gets straight into where you need to be, instead of the traditional therapy of let's start when you were a tiny little girl. It's what I found I really liked was it was addressing what I was thinking at the moment. And then she did delve back in, but it was making me feel like, okay, I can actually see I'm going to get there. I'm finding a solution, as opposed to let's start from when I was, 1 or 2. Yeah, and I know that makes sense for you because that's what you do in your work. But I guess it's hard for me to put it into words. But all I can say is I have loved it. I still get coached once a month. It's great for me just to tap in. And especially with this podcast, a lot of things come up for me too. And I listen to other women's stories and they resonate with me so much. So in my sessions, I can bring that up as well. And it's been an amazing journey these last 2 years.
No, that's
More
so
so
lovely.
than,
That you discover parts of yourself and you start to have more empathy for the reason why you might have made certain decisions in the past, but you've now got that new awareness that it doesn't have to be that way again in the future, which opens up a whole new range of opportunities, which again is exciting.
It does.
So, and it's scary. Like that's the thing. I think that's what holds a lot of people back, is because, we want to be in that safe, familiar environment, and you're pushing yourself into something new. That's really uncomfortable, but that's where the real growth also comes.
Yeah.
And you've got that, as you said earlier, that you work on yourself and then suddenly something else comes up and you've got to work through that next step. And that's that whole, you've got that new level, new devil sort of mentality. There's something else. It'll never go away because we constantly evolve. Well, we should constantly evolve as humans to get the most out of life. And we've got, as we were talking before we hit record, they've got one precious life. Don't bloody waste it.
No.
Don't 20, 30 years time just sit and regret wishing that you'd done certain things and you were worried what others thought, because they a fiddler's fig
they
about
don't.
what you did.
Yeah, I know, it's true. Isn't it funny that we think we're so important that other people actually really care that much?
Our ego will keep us bloody stuck and chained and to what we thought we should be doing and pleasing everybody else. Now that's exciting. So with regards to the podcast, what was the catalyst? So did your kinesiologist that you were talking about, did she suggest you do that, or did you?
No, I went there. Well, I went there with the intention of I want to do a podcast. I just don't have the courage to push, the record button. Yeah. And she just helped me with that, helped me get to that point. And I'd already done so much work and research, but it was all sitting there, but I just couldn't move forward with it. So in a way, I was glad that I already had the idea as opposed to not knowing. Because a few years ago, I just didn't know. And you talk to friends and they'd say, well, why don't you start this and that? And I thought, no, I want something to come to me. And, really, it is all there. All the answers are there. It's just you've got to open your eyes and be open to receiving them. And I'm a big believer now in that, because I love listening to podcasts. And like I said before, I thought, well, why can't I do it? It's exactly what I want to do. I'm a big listener. And why not put my own show out there? So now that I've done it, I haven't looked back, and I just love it. I'm so excited to keep it growing and have more different stories. to
Yeah,
tell.
and we've got fairly similar themes in that. Like I have mine's slightly different, yours is slightly different, but the theme is that we're trying to tell the women or share stories of women in our age group in their
Yeah.
second half of life, that there
Yeah.
is more to what they may have thought is out there. And there's so many amazing everyday women out there who we
Yes.
wouldn't know about if we didn't have a platform like this.
Yeah. And that's what I thought. It's not about bringing on people who have a media presence or, you know, someone famous, that we all like to have a sticky beak and have a listen into their life. I thought, no, if I feel that I need inspiration, I'd rather hear about the lady next door and how she got there as opposed to someone famous. So I thought, no, it's about giving a platform to women to share their stories and be open and be real. And I found that women are so generous in sharing. They're really happy to open up in this stage of life. They're not so concerned about what other people think.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of wisdom that women can share as well, because by this
So
stage
much.
of life, you have gone through a lot of experiences
Ooh.
and still
Oh, yeah.
a lot more to come, and no doubt in the
Yeah.
next few decades. But yeah, you don't have you're not as reserved. I'm far more open and willing to share things, the good, the bad, and the ugly now than I would have been at the age of 10 years ago, even.
Yeah. Although I will say one thing, down in Sydney, they've got this charity swim coming up where you go in nude.
Oh.
And another fellow podcaster reached out and said, oh, so are you going to be joining in? And I said, no, I might be at that point in my life where I'm happy to share my, my inner thoughts and whatever else, but Michelle will not get naked with a whole lot of other people and go for an ocean swim. It's hard for me to even get into the water with a swimming costume, let alone going in naked. So yeah,
I'm going to go for a skinny dip in my own pool, but I don't know about sharing it all with other poor people. But
yeah, I mean, how amazing
good
would
luck
that
to them.
feel? Yeah, but again, you do you, but I'm not doing that. I'm not at that point yet.
No, I don't know if I'll get to that point.
No.
I've come to terms with how my body is changing, but yeah, or I don't think I need to go to that next.
No.
Feel a certain way. But yeah, I hope the people who do it really enjoy it. There's obviously a reason behind why they've chosen to do that.
Of course.
They may not want to expose themselves and their voice and their opinions and their thoughts like you do on a podcast.
True, but expose their bodies. Yeah, no.
And so with your podcast, is there somebody that you would really love in the future to interview, or have you got any thoughts about other people?
Yeah, I have always lots of thoughts. I would actually like to interview older women who are around my mother's age, women who are in their 70s and 80s, because I think their perspective on aging is very different to our generations. And I've had the opportunity to speak to a few older ladies, and they come from such a different background, post-war, very conservative, and the way they view our stage in life is super interesting. And even their wisdom and their recommendations and suggestions on how they think we should live our lives are really, really interesting. So, their wisdom goes a long way as well. So again, at the moment, it's always been women in sort of mid-40s to, mid-60s. But I think that generation, the older generation, would also be quite insightful.
It would be. And when you said that, it sort of triggered me. I had to look on my phone as you were speaking. So I was listening to you, Michelle, but I just also wanted to find the name of this podcast that I listened to last year.
Yeah.
It was called Wiser Than Me. And you remember Elaine from Seinfeld?
Yes. I've listened to one of hers.
Yeah, and she did. She interviewed, famous older women, but
like
they were
Jane Fonda.
It was fascinating listening to them, and as you're saying, their take on life and what they would advise. Like Julia's, I think she's in her 60s. She's older than us, but how they view younger women and what they suggest. What they would do if they were in our shoes now. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a good podcast as well.
yeah. So I think it's like we're one big village of women who have a lot of stories to share. And why not? Why not give women a platform to share their stories? Because I think it's invigorating. When you asked me to write a little bio on myself, I was telling you before, I found that really confronting. But
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to do that because we all have a story. We all come from somewhere that's made us who we are today. And I think
Mm.
that's beautiful. Let's
Yeah,
share it.
yeah, yeah, I agree. So we've talked about your past. We've talked about what you're doing now, the present. What are you hoping for
Yeah.
in the future?
For the future, I personally, I would love to do more travel. I
Mm.
find travel really ignites my adventurous side. I love learning about different cultures. So I definitely want to do more of that. And now that my girls are at a stage where they don't need me as much anymore, I really feel that freedom now.
Mm.
And hopefully, just to keep learning more about myself and really pushing myself forward and into areas that possibly still frighten me a little bit, like public speaking, as you do. Someone said to me, you should start, in small groups. I don't think I'm ready for that, but who knows? So maybe in a year's time, I'll look back and think, why was I so scared now that I've taken that step forward? So I would like to take the podcast to another level and see where it takes me. I just want to keep going with it. So I'm really excited about the possibilities that'll come out of it.
Oh, that's great. And in the show notes, I'll also talk about how women can find you then, not only on your podcast, your second act. Where can they, and I'll have the links for all of that in the show notes. Where else can they find you, Michelle?
On Instagram. So
Lovely.
you can
With
follow me or LinkedIn. Yeah. And it's
lovely.
got what I do is I post a lot about episodes that are coming up. You can also see a little bit about myself. That's another thing I want to do. I need to put myself out there a lot more. So I've got to push through that fear as well, because I think people need to connect with me as the host, because I guess I am the podcast at the end of the day. So it is important. And you do a great job of doing that, Joe. You're always putting little things up, and that's why I think I connected with you. I got an essence of who you were.
Yeah. And that's uncomfortable because you've
Oh,
always got, like you said, you've got that voice in your head as well, but you've just got to get over yourself sometimes and just damn well do it. And
yes, I got to get over myself. Exactly.
but get over
And like
yourself
you,
as well, just bloody do
yeah.
it.
And no one's really going to be looking at me going, seriously?
Oh,
Like,
and if they do,
who
too bad.
cares?
It's
I
usually
know.
a reflection on them
I
anyway,
know.
Michelle. There's always
Yes,
unfollow. They can always swipe. It's not,
exactly. Anyway,
yeah.
I'm not too concerned. I've
Good
just
on
got to
you.
put myself out there.
Well, you're doing a lot more than what most women are doing right now. So well done, taking
Thank
those
you.
big, brave steps and
Yeah,
following what your passion is and discovering a new purpose for this stage of life. That's brilliant. Love it.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
important.
it is
I wish that
important.
for most women in our age group. Whatever it is, it can be something really small, but just take that little step to
Yep.
opening your eyes to something new. Because if you don't, you'll keep yourself in the same spot and you'll keep yourself small. And you know
Yes.
what? That's boring, because before you know it, you're going to be 80 and thinking,
Yeah,
I should have. So there
that's right.
shouldn't be any should haves.
Yep.
It's just
Yeah.
do, suck and
Yes.
see.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree. Agree totally. And final question, Michelle. What do you hope 80-year-old Michelle is going to say about current day Michelle?
Funny, I just said that, didn't I? 80 years old. I think she's going to say she actually took a step forward. She took a chance to really discover who she was. She stopped being scared and she really kicked ass in her middle years, and life was good. Life was kind.
Mm.
And at 80, she's going to say, I'm really happy with what I've done. I'm proud of me. And I think that's something that I've always searched for. I've always wanted to be proud of myself. And I'm starting to feel that now.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for ending the episode together on such a lovely note. I'm proud of what you're doing too.
Thank you, Joe. And thanks so much for asking me to come onto the show. And you'll be coming on mine. So I'm
I
super
know,
excited
looking
about
forward
that
to
as
it. I'm really
well.
excited as well. I'm really excited. So thank you very much for
Yeah.
today. And as I said, all the links to your podcast, to Instagram, email, and so forth can be found in the show notes.
And all the
Cheers.
best for your second act.
Oh, yeah, yes, can't wait. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.